The following is a presentation of NoVA hackers at ShmooCon Epilogue 2014, hosted by Mach37, brought to you by Compute Cycle.
Okay, thank you for joining me today, and I'd like to talk to you about a wonderful topic. It started all with basically setting up a phishing implementation, and then realizing that my possible malware was gone, or that everybody could grasp it. So the topic, a little iffy, but is still the same, is I've gone fishing and now I want my hook back because essentially my hook has been taken along with the bait. My name is Paul Streander, Nitro, and you can reach me at the address below. Well, let me talk a little bit about myself. Who am I? I work on a red team with exploit development, as well as reverse engineering, coding and gaming. That's always a hobby. And I just roundabout like to get involved with projects and have fun. So next, let's kind of get into the meat of the topic. You've hooked one. So how many people, I'll go with the I guess, area in the room here, actually have gone off on their fishing expedition, hooked one, but then kind of lost what they're serving up? Okay, a good amount here. Okay, so in this picture you can see there's a pretty big fish, but that's also a pretty big hook that you've lost too. So essentially you really don't want to lose those hooks, and that's the discussion that I'd like to bring up, and then how we stop that, and how we actually we recognize when we're doing it wrong, how we can actually implement doing it right, and what are the ways we can achieve this. So how do you keep your bait? Say I've created some really great malware, I just served it up on a website, and I want to keep this. I want to keep it for myself. I want to reuse it. I don't want to have to rewrite it. And my next thing is to keep it. Well, in this sense, I just go back and I cut it out of the fish. Well, that sometimes doesn't work. So say not only myself, right? I can't go back to whoever I'm working with or anything else and ask for it back. I'm going to say I get I don't know, 100 scans throughout a week or something, and everybody else has access to it. Well, now it's out there. You can give an example of when I go looking for malware. That's probably one of the more interesting things to do, is you find a bunch of encoded files with JavaScript or PHP, and then that's where you find that somebody's made the wrong mistake, right? They've actually not done it right, and they've put their malware so where it's actually accessible from either the server side or from their client. And so people can gain the binary that's usually dropped. There's really good analysts out there, and most of the analysts will go ahead and reverse the files or encoding, because it's not just one file. And everybody loves to solve puzzles. So let's just say I keep the bait. What's the outcome of that? So if I keep the bait, and I'm doing myself a favor by keeping the bait in itself, what does that gain me when I'm actually keeping my malware? Well, if I'm off on five or six tests throughout the year, that means it's less time to reset, less time to set up again. Put it in the terms of an adversary. That could be somebody who's just going to go ahead and serve you up malware just because they want to, and then they're not going to serve it up in PHP anymore. They want to try this new technique. What does that mean to them? That means it's less time for them to roll out their own again. So because they don't have to roll out their own one more time. That means that they can use the same one this time, and it doesn't have to change because it's going to be the same dropper, just with a little bit of a change in how it's possibly packed or sent over on your system. But I, as the IR team, go over and try and look for that binary, and I'm probably not going to see it if I do it correctly. Now, if I'm doing it wrong, right, I can wget the PHP file, I can go over and try and pull it down, it's out there, and there's frameworks out there. There's and this is more for your browser exploitation framework, right? Everybody knows about Beef. This is more for your testing. But when you have somebody that's against you trying to phish you, the most common scripting language I've seen or rolled out is PHP. And so when you see PHP out there, most people don't know how to do the rest of the things on the server correctly to secure it or lock it down. And so when that takes place, you're running into, oh, great, PHP's there. Well, most of the time you can just index through all the PHP files, grab all the files, pull them down, and once you have the PHP files, you can determine, okay, is the PHP file now pulling a malware file, or is it just encoded on the page? If it's encoded on the page, then okay, that's great, I just grabbed it with a PHP file. If it's somewhere else on the server, do I need to point to somewhere else on the server, or do I need to do that by now playing with the variables within the PHP file? So there's ways of doing that, and so that's where I came up with the idea of it. Currently, people are doing it wrong. So how can we do that correctly? Well, the idea is you just need to make it so where when you set up a campaign, when you look to do it, and I guess when you look to set up your site, doesn't even need to be your site. When you look to go to somebody else's site, you probe it, you poke it, and you make sure that what you're doing is actually correct, and you're not just getting bounce back. So you can look at this in two different ways. If I look at it from somebody that's an attacker and I'm setting up an offensive site. If I set up an offensive site, what I want to do is I want to just set up a server that it sets up a server and it's working with Apache. I either use IP tables or I use htaccess, and I'm going to really know who is coming into my area, and I'm going to pinpoint my targets. And then from there, I'm going to then send them to specific sites that I have on my server. I'll get into that a little bit later, but basically that means that the bait that I have, or the malware I have, basically stays and sticks around, and nobody has access to it that I don't want to have access to it. So basically I set a hook, or I let you get to the malware that I want you to get to, and your IR team doesn't get access to it. Now the other thing is, if an IR team comes in, you have to start to recognize when that's being done to you. So you have to recognize when your FireEye boxes are going off to the same site and just dropping the connection, or getting a blank page, versus you know that they're going off to a site and they're getting the same blank page but at a different time, or they're getting different content at another time, and you can see it over the wire, right? Because the only way you can check for this is actually over the wire, and that's it. I've run it around a couple times with different people, and the only way that this comes up is if you're looking directly over the wire, if it's not SSL, and you basically see, okay, there's changes from this destination address and the source, and at different times they're showing up as different. So now what's the best way for the attacker to actually set up my server. In the sense, I can set up multiple instances of, I can do Flash, I can do Java, I can do Silverlight, I can do anything else, and I can put it all in one file. Now, by doing that, I don't have to worry about who comes to my box. And so by saying, okay, I have somebody coming to my machine, but they're not my target, I'm just going to give them a page that I want them to see. In this case, I want them to see happy ponies and go away. Now, the next person, I might want them to see a specific page. And so by coming to my address and coming to my page, I'll dynamically generate them a page. But then I might also throw in an iframe that has a very specific, okay, I can tell by the environment variables that you're running Java. I can tell that you're running where your location is, where you're from, and then I can serve you up something to say whether or not there, and I'm fine tuning it as I go. Some things, software is getting better. It allows you to do more things. Toss out ideas that there's no JS out there. I've thought about switching up what I do now to even throwing it into Node CGI. So how much can you get from one towards another? It's a give and take. But the idea that I can run JavaScript dynamically on your client machine is really what I'm after as well. So if I can run a bunch of server side, if I can generate HTML pages dynamically, and then I can also inject JavaScript when I want to, and then read from that JavaScript as well, that's what I'm looking for. That's the end goal. But so that's where I'm coming up with I can throw out as many casting rods as I want, right? Depending upon what fish I'm looking for, that's the clear objective. So essentially, I'm going to catch one, and I'm going to catch the target fish. And this is exactly what you're looking for. You're looking for, I want the targeted fish. This is what I'm actually looking for in a fish. You're not looking for, hey, just throw up a page, throw in an iframe, and hope you get something. You're looking for, I'm looking for the best fish possible without tipping my hand on where my malware is or what it is, and hopefully by the time you're all done, the IR team on the other side isn't going to pick up on what you've done as well. So the devil's in the details, obviously. As I mentioned earlier, I've talked it through with other analysts. I'd be open to discussion kind of when we start wrapping up and we go through more of the source and some of the code I'll show you later, and even a few of the pages as to whether or not PCAP is really what gives you away. I mean, how does one determine or detect the differences? And the differences I think that you can detect are if you're constantly monitoring and that same statistic comes up as that source or that destination IP, but then it changes and it fluctuates with the same given HTML, because you can launch from an HTML file, which then launches a CGI file. You can do it different ways. You can do different ways of actually just going to a static file. And I'll get into that detail later. So, as I like to tell you what it's about, now it's about showing you some of the things. And here I'm just going to switch over to some of the code. Terminal. And do you have terminal, Brett?
No, it's been taking about 35 seconds to update, so
okay.
Just go ahead.
All right. So in terminal, I go ahead and there's a lot of comments, because if I don't have something in there and I'm using it from somewhere else, then I'm going to run into it later and forget about it. It's usually like if you don't put a sticky note somewhere, you forget. So that's what I do with comments. So let's just go off with a few things for people that do know Ruby or not. You notice that was a CGI file. Well, this CGI file is actually a Ruby file that then generates what you want from it. The idea here is that I can go ahead and call anything a CGI file, and then by calling anything a CGI file, I don't have to go into the CGI extensions on Apache. I can just say it's a CGI file and then run Ruby in it as the interpreter, and then I can blast you with whatever. I didn't have a meta ASM example in here, probably should have. That's another great one, so I can pump you off shellcode as well. But for some of the purposes, I wanted to show that JavaScript's here, and I can actually show that JavaScript can be run on the client and then pushed on the screen, as well as and I'm fine-tuning that. There are some things I noticed that can and cannot be done. That's based upon the author of who wrote exec.js. So if you want to do it yourself, you want to write your own library, that's great. The underlying mechanism for this is Node or is V8, which is Google's engine, so that they wrote for Chrome. Most authors for Ruby, when they write a gem, they've already gone through and they've done a lot of wrapping. And so the best one that I found that have already wrapped this is exec.js. In this example here that we're looking at, I use secure random. It's just something to give me base address, base 64, so I can get some randomization. So I'll show you why it's not. It doesn't even have to be random at that point. SQLite. You can't write files in CGI. When you have a CGI file, there's a lot of rules in what you can and can't do in writing. So what you usually want to do is interface with a database. So you want to pull from a database that you've already written to. The idea there is you want to write your exploits, build a type of database structure that you can easily index, and then throw them in there. And so based upon logic that you pull back, you can say, oh, that needs this exploit Y, right? And I'm just going to serve it up. And so now I'll take this exploit, pull it out of the database, and then I'll serve it up as a variable. And so now I'll just put it a variable into memory. And so by taking this variable in the memory, I'll throw it into the spot where there's an object. Here's an example of how you easily get JavaScript to compile in exec.js as a context. And I'll go through some of the other things that aren't implemented here but could easily be implemented. So there's a user agent gem, and this user agent gem is just as well as when you pull back user agents and you actually want to determine what user agent you have. There's an environment variable parsing within CGI that allows you to pull a slew of environment variables. I have one environment variable that I pull at this time. I could pull a good amount of environment variables. And I'll go through just in the code that I have here as to which ones are available. But as you can see, there's what you can do in parsing and keeping track of and determining on now what kind of state you would go into. Here's an example of what you can do with database, pulling from, selecting, executing. And So if I have an environment variable, these are all of the read-only environment variables that you have available to you through Ruby CGI. And so through Ruby CGI, you have all these environment variables that come across the wire that allow you to now determine what am I looking at, who's coming to my site, what am I going to do, and what do I actually want to do with something. So now I've just attached one here, and it's easily on the site. I did a request UI. I put the request UI in. I wasn't going to throw all the environment variables in. I didn't have a lot of logic in here. I'm going to flush this out with more of what I do at another time. The other one is I can do host, from, negotiate, refer. I can grab the user agent and then parse the user agent with what I had before. My favorite thing, or one of my favorite things to do, is manipulate the cookies. So I can now send and store messages, or not even messages, but items on somebody else's desktop, and then retrieve that later to determine if they've already visited my my server once before. So I can now apply them with cookies and determine, hey, have you been here? If you've been here, great. If you haven't, all right. And if you have, why are you visiting me again? Because I should have already given you something. And if you are visiting me, but you're coming in as a different, I guess, user agent, if you're coming into something else, why are you trying to mix it up? Because I just gave you cookies that say you were this. So for this is an implementation of test, is to see how far I could get with cookies. And so cookies, I just threw out some base64 and some hex to see what was the largest size that I could actually throw in there.
Question.
Yes?
You can use cookies to determine that they read your phishing email, for example,
Yes.
as opposed to come to your site, the NoVA, which of course you would not expect them to do.
Correct. So,
Can you repeat the question?
let me make sure I had this correct. But the question was, could I use cookies to determine whether or not the user had visited my site once before, or they had gotten the phishing email? So, and
Actually using the refer to say that they're coming to you directly from the phishing email.
using the refer to come directly to me from the phishing email?
Right.
Okay. And yes, I can do that with the refer environment variable. And then I can store that as a cookie saying that yes, they were. I use the refer variable, and I haven't used images. I used images in the past, right, for that.
Because if it's an incident responder, wouldn't they be on a VM and they might be typing the URL from the phishing message, and not necessarily actually as the target would click on.
Okay, I see what you're saying. So, if it's an incident responder and they're coming in from a specific IP block and it doesn't have exactly what I put in the URL, then sometimes I try and embed something as well with what I sent across. And so if that comes across as well when they click on it, then usually that's a bonus for determining that it's a go-ahead. And that actually lets them through HT access. So then that would mean that they got through the HT access, because HT access checks that first before letting them anywhere else in the here. So because somebody could falsify that or just double click it and be an incident responder. The problem is I'd probably serve them up something. if they did that and they cloned it. And I only serve up one thing. So if I've already done it once, then I mark it in the database that I've done it. And so if somebody's already come back once and they had basically what I had sent over, then if somebody tries to do it again, they get denied, and that gets flagged. So I guess that's a quick solution or an answer in the sense of that. So
You want to avoid a replay?
yes, yeah, that's how I've done that in the past. In this one, this would be more of a demonstration, but for replays, I usually keep a database of ones that I have sent out, and I encrypt what I'm sending out. If it matches the encryption, then it's good. If it doesn't match the encryption, then it's not good. So basically somebody's trying to replay something and they don't have any way to try and put it back together or decrypt or to replay the encryption. So there's no way they can fake that. I'm getting beeped here. So I guess the cookies is just a way to send something across. And I'll show that later, but essentially, and then you just do CGI on whatever else you want in the head. So say I wanted to put, here I just have good, because I had good and bad for my CSS pages. But with CSS3, you can get very creative, and all you have to do is put whatever you want in that block and whatever you want to be in either that head portion, and it can be just a variable with all the code up above. Like I had shown before with the JavaScript, where you just say JS and then backslash, or sorry, not backslash, the arrow, and then you basically fill out everything you want. You don't have to worry about formatting or format errors, I guess you could say. And then you could just finish it off and then put that variable right in there, and you're good. There are some things that I have not done in this section, but have done in the past. And then with CGI body, here I'm just putting in the request URI as the quick example. Okay, Brent, I'm switching over to Firefox real fast.
All right.
So, in Firefox, we have good, and we all love kittens, right? So, we basically, the request URI is CGI demo. I only chose one, right? But as you saw, there was plenty of environment variables you could have chosen to either use or parse on or choose to actually create your logic on. And
Hey, can you switch? I think just switch.
the
desktop presenter software?
desktop presenter software?
Yeah.
Got it.
Let's switch to Firefox.
Okay, thank you.
That looks better. I got kittens.
You have kittens now? All right.
Here, look at kittens. Everyone else now. There we go.
All right, so everybody has kittens. All right, good deal. So everybody loves kittens. You figure it's a great kittens. But now, I mean, with kittens, I can also show you happy pages of kittens and also inject something as well. So I can, where you saw the demo and the head object, I can put an embedded object as well. And it's all Ruby that you can just throw in. I wasn't gonna throw in a Swift, but I have for fun, I think I created a NoVA Hackers SWIF that I can show you that they actually do embed. But just as an example, this is actually coming from the HTML site, the base site. This is the index. This isn't going to, this isn't from a CGI site. So all of this is you have one index page that has an iframe in it, and it points to your CGI, and then from there you have some CSS magic that says fill the whole screen, right? Give me everything. And at that point, nobody knows it. They're already going to your page. You've already sent out a phishing campaign to go to your page. Everything's great. Maybe you bought the domain for an IP address. You're great. You've done all your phishing campaign development, and you're out there. And so really what it's about is now keeping what you've created. And so this is the way to keep what you've created, because if I were to do, I'm gonna go from another terminal here so I can try and wget something, but give me 1 second. Actually, that might not be in the budget. You're more than welcome to try and wget it. How about that? Because I'm on the presenting laptop, I don't want to start showing things that I don't need to. So basically, you're more than welcome to try and get the CGI file. There's the path. There's the IP. Right? Go wget it. If you get it, cool. Don't exploit the box. Right? But yeah, if you do, it's just a VPS. I'll reset it. So other than that, I mean, that is basically how I keep something, and then how most people should be keeping things, and how it's not done now, right? And I think within that, I'd love to take a few questions on what people think of, where they think things should be done, or with what should be done, because the
Have you executed code on my system?
no code's been executed on the system. I am actually looking for that, but desktop presenter doesn't see that.
Terminal.
Change the source.
Switch it back to colors LCD. Now switch it back to window.
Put your left foot in.
Okay.
Now open up application, and it should have been there.
It's okay.
It only sees the stuff on this current screen. So cancel it out,
Got it.
then switch. Do the hokey pokey and you turn yourself around. Preview.
Nice.
That's what it's all about.
Thank you. Okay, so we played with demo time here, and I showed you some code. So in short, it's all about selecting your target, selecting it, knowing what it is, doing the spear phishing campaign, making sure you keep what you want, right? And then going ahead and really setting up something that's dynamic. CGI is not it. It's not the only thing. I guess I want to elaborate there. There's a very small HTTP server, HTTPS server that Rob had posted on one of his blog sites not too long ago. It's about 40K, I believe. It's a very nice HTTP server. It also has a EULA backend engine. So because EULA it's similar to Ruby in what you can do, you can also use something like that. And instead of using htaccess, you can now use IP tables and basically say, I'm going to run on port, 3600, and everything that's coming in on 3600 or everything that's coming in on 80 is now pushed to 3600, right? So you can force your traffic to go to what you want on your machine, and only people really looking at the traffic, the PCAP traffic, are going to start to see something hokey, and that's why I say PCAP traffic is really where your weakness is. And with that, it's a small server. You still get that dynamic capability, and you can set it up in an instant, right? And you still get that, oh, let me grab your file. Well, you're going to grab my file. You're going to go try and wget my file, but it's going to generate it dynamically, just like CGI does. So it's going to not give you a flat file like PHP does, right? That has all the contents in it. It's going to give you a dynamic file. Now, along that line, there's there's Python. So Python has its own version of it. And if you really want to get into Rails, you can do it in Rails, but I'm not one that, I'd rather put Ruby inside a CGI file than go Rails. So, and I'd love to hear back whether or not anybody else knows of anything. There's EULA itself. Oh, the one I was going to try next, Node.js. Node.js is probably the thing that is going to take over on being able to do server-side and client-side manipulation, because you can actually interface with the client at the same time and inject with the client. So, any good questions? I'll be willing to take those.
What about bad questions?
Bad questions too, yeah. Okay, lots of both. Okay.
Mod security might actually be a decent idea to try something, especially with one-off filtering and saying this is an IR person to trigger on them versus being somebody else. It's going to be high performance than a CGI would be by far if you went down that route.
Said mod security would be higher performance over CGI. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's a good way, because there's already templates in there, and the regulated engine is pretty simple to change and manipulate however you want, so you can do any kind of different context to it.
I think I started using htaccess to do a lot of that style first, to weed it out, and then anything. So we're going against IR at this point, right? So htaccess is my anti-IR in the beginning. And then anything that does slip by, I have, okay, now you're off to the site. And if you don't meet the criteria, and I'll explain what doesn't meet the criteria. I have people that say, everybody's on tablets today, and they're working on their own personal tablets. That doesn't fit my bill, right? I can't exploit your tablet, right? Your tablet is your own personal device, and it's not a corporate device. So, and you're visiting my site. Well, how do I get you off of your tablet and still visit the same content? So I have to throw up something that tablets can't see, and maybe that's Java. Or sorry, not Java, wait, hold on. Right, maybe it's Flash. So maybe it's Flash, and so now I'm gonna give you Flash. And because I give you Flash, now you're gonna take a second look and be like, oh, I have Flash on my tablet. And because I have Flash on my tablet, I'm going to say, okay, do I really want to go here? Or I'm just going to say, no, I'm done. That was like my one attempt to go here. And so I'm betting on the people that really want to go there, because those are the people I actually want to go. Yes?
How are you
resumes?
Yeah, so if somebody connection gets halfway through, you still want to deliver the rest of the payload. Are you allowing that at this point?
I have not thought about a resume session. No, I can answer that. So if somebody's disconnecting halfway through and then starting up again. So most of this is, I'm hoping within one packet stream because it's small payloads. But I'll take a look at that. Anything else, other good or bad comments that okay. That's about it. That wraps up basically what you do. And I thank you for having me out today.
This has been a presentation of NoVA Hackers at ShmooCon Epilogue 2014, hosted by Mach37, brought to you by ComputeCycle. Video recording and streaming services provided by Cranial Thunder Productions.